Walter Whitman was born on May 31, 1819, in West Hills, town of Huntington, Long Island. He was the second child in a family of 11. His parents were Walter Whitman, a house builder, and Louisa Van Belson. Whitman grew up in the Brooklyn district of New York and Long Island. At the age of 12, Whitman began learning to work as a printer. It was around this time that he discovered a great passion for literature. Largely self-taught, he read many books, including works by the great classic writers Homer, Dante, Shakespeare, and the Bible. After a devastating fire in the printing district of New York, Whitman was left without a job. But in 1836, at the age of 17, he began his career as teacher in the one-room schoolhouses of Long Island. He continued to teach until 1841, when he turned to journalism as a full-time career. He founded a weekly newspaper, Long Islander, and later edited a number of Brooklyn and New York papers. In 1848, Whitman left the Brooklyn Daily Eagle to become editor of the New Orleans Crescent. It was in New Orleans that he experienced firsthand the viciousness of slavery in the slave markets of that city. On his return to Brooklyn in the fall of 1848, he founded a free soil newspaper, the Brooklyn Freeman, and continued to develop the unique style of poetry. In 1865, Whitman took out a copyright on the first edition of Leaf of Grass, which consisted of 12 untitled poems and a preface. He published the volume himself and sent a copy to Emerson in July of 1865. Emerson was one of America's leading writers and freethinkers. He was astonished by the unique style of Whitman. He praised the volume extensively, and this helped Whitman gain greater recognition. Whitman released a second edition of the book in 1866, containing 33 poems, a letter from Emerson praising the first edition, and a long open letter by Whitman in response. During his lifetime, Whitman continued to refine the volume, publishing several more editions of the book. Noted Whitman scholar Jimmy Killingsworth writes that the merge, as Whitman conceived it, is the tendency of the individual self to overcome moral, psychological, and political boundaries. Thematically and poetically, the notion dominates the three major poems in 1855. I Sing, The Body Electric, The Sleepers, and Son of Myself, all of which were merged in the first edition under the single title Leaf of Grass, but were demarcated by clear breaks in the text and the repetition of the title. At the outbreak of the Civil War, Whitman wrote Beat, Beat, Drums, a patriotic poem and rally call for the North. During the war, he wrote freelance journalism and visited the wounded at New York Area Hospital. In 1862, he traveled to Washington, D.C. to care for his brother who had been wounded in the war. Overcome by the suffering of the many wounded in Washington, Whitman decided to stay and work in the hospitals and stayed in the city for 11 years. His wartime experiences left a profound mark on Whitman. He took a job as a clerk for the Department of the Interior, which ended when the Secretary of the Interior, James Harlan, discovered that Whitman was the author of Leaf of Grass, which Harlan found offensive. Harlan fired the poet. Whitman struggled to support himself through most of his life. In Washington, he lived on a clerk's salary and modest royalties, and spent any excess money, including gifts from friends, to buy supplies for the patients he nursed. He had also been sending money to his widowed mother and an invalid brother. From time to time, writers both in the States and in England sent him purses of money so that he could get by. Walt Whitman was heavily influenced by James, a belief in God without needing or an organized religion. In his writings, he suggested that all religions were valid, but he himself did not adhere to one particular creed. This underlying oneness of the universe is a recurring theme of Whitman's poetry. In the early of 1870s, Whitman settled in Camden, where he had come to visit his dying mother and his brother's house. However, after suffering a stroke, Whitman found it impossible to return to Washington. He stayed with his brother until 1882. Publication of Leaf of Grass gave Whitman enough money to buy a home in Camden. In the simple two-story clapboard house, Whitman spent his declining years working on additions and revisions to a new edition of the book and preparing his final volume of poems and prose, Goodbye, My Fancy, 1891. Leaf of Grass, which during his lifetime had gone through many editions and expanded to some 300 poems. On March 26, 1892, Walt Whitman passed away in Camden. He was buried in a large mausoleum he had built in Camden's Harley Cemetery.